If you're currently enrolled in a public speaking class, or maybe you've just finished one, and you think you might be interested in trying this thing called forensics, which is competitive public speaking, this next recording is going to be very helpful, hopefully. What I want to do is sort of describe and give you a roadmap, which is why I have the maps here, of where you need to go if you're doing an informative speech or if you think you might be doing a persuasive speech. They're not exactly the same, but they're not altogether different. So a couple questions that usually come up at this point is, what kind of topics do I select? Well, there is a difference between a classroom topic and one that is done in competition. Many times students are very lucky and they stumble on a topic for a classroom assignment and the instructor says, you know what, you should do this as a do this at a tournament. And others, the instructor will say, well, what you did was really good. Now we need to take you to the next step. So there is a distinction between a classroom presentation or a speech topic and one that is used in competition. The topics also differ based on the event. So an informative speech, so let me talk about classroom very, very quickly if you're new to public speaking. If you are looking for an informative speech, you want to make sure that it's something that the audience isn't too familiar with because nobody wants to hear something they've already heard. You want to find something that excites you and is interesting to you because that enthusiasm will, motivate the audience to listen. You also want to find something that's significant. In other words, the audience shouldn't be sitting there thinking, why am I spending 5 minutes listening to this? There's got to be something that is has some kind of significance. And that doesn't mean that it's useful. It just means that there's something about the speech that's compelling, that we could talk about it now, we could talk about it later, we would always talk about it. So it could have cultural significance or historic significance. It also could be something that is, based in technology or some kind of invention. With a competitive speech, this is a little bit trickier. My first first strong suggestion is to talk to your coach because usually coaches have ideas because they've been judging tournaments for however long they've been coaching, and they've seen topics that have been winning, and they've seen topics that somehow miss the mark. So that would be, of course, my big suggestion is always talk to your coach. But with that in mind, I can say very briefly that an informative speech probably deals more with technology, some kind of cutting edge invention. It could also be some cutting edge idea or some new concept. Usually it's fairly new because, again, your judge in a speech competition is going to be either a speech instructor or a graduate student or a former student that's competed. And so they sort of know what the lay of the land is with regard to, new and cutting edge topics. With a persuasive speech, again, in a classroom, it might be that you can do something that's controversial. You might have a persuasive speech topic that has a pro and a con side, and that's fine for your instructor and for the audience and for the assignment that you've been given. When you get into competition, however, a persuasive speech usually follows a problem solution format. In other words, there's some problem or injustice or situation in the world that is causing some attention. It's usually something where there's some kind of negative impact like injury, suffering, or death. And then your job is to provide a solution to that and show the audience how they can be agents in whatever change you want to try to advocate. So that's a quick answer on a very long question, which is what kind of topics. The next question then that usually comes up is, how do I know if it's a good one? Sometimes students will say, what's going to win? And I almost have to say that's almost putting the cart before the horse, so to speak, that you don't want to think about winning. You want to think about a good topic that you're excited about, that you can live with for, the rest of the semester. And if this is a fall semester, into the spring semester, because usually competitors do the same topic every tournament until they get to whatever state nationals they're going to. The only time people switch out a topic is if for some reason it's not competitive enough or someone else has a similar topic and the decision has been made to scrap it and start over. So really, the first answer here is go to your coach. I should make that a quiz question. Go to your coach. That would be the first way to find out if it's a good topic. But what I think you should then do is, if you really like a topic, you need to kind of do a sales pitch for it. And this is what I ask students to do. And I think it's a good start for everybody who's looking at doing a competitive speech is, do your own sales pitch. Look up some different websites. You can easily Google it. It's not a hard thing to do. If you find a number of websites that, first off, if the websites are recent, that's also a good idea. But sort of getting what would be called an elevator test or an elevator pitch is, what can I tell my coach or my instructor in about 30 seconds that makes this a really compelling topic. So that's one way to look at it, is look at the information that's been written. Does this information excite you? And that really is, I think, more important than anybody realizes, because again, you're going to live with this topic for a while. And if you're not really driven by it after you do this kind of research, then it might not be the best fit for you. Now, with that, I just want to make sure that I've emphasized here that if the topic initially isn't interesting, it doesn't mean that it's not a good topic or a good topic for you. But if you do a little bit of research and you go, wow, I never realized this, because there's a whole bunch of stuff out there all of us don't know. And if you find yourself thinking, wow, this is really interesting, I want to find out more about it, then it might be then a good fit. The last question on this first slide, I only have 2 slides and then I have some speech demonstrations for you, is how do I start putting it together? And again, talk to your coach on what they would like you to do. But if you are working without a coach, or you want to try to do something first and then show it to your coach, which is what I usually suggest students do, is you can try a couple of things. You can do what's called a vomit draft, and that's basically put everything you know and this cool stuff that you're finding from websites down on paper. And paper obviously means on your computer as well. So it doesn't mean it has to be a physical paper, but write it all down. The one thing that is not helpful, and I've had many students do this, is they will simply copy the website link and put it on a page. Well, that doesn't do anything. You can't look at it. I can't look at it. If you look at it, then you unclick it and it's back to just the link again. So what you probably should do is read through some articles and copy and paste things that you find compelling, that you think you might want to cite. Not that you're plagiarizing the content for the speech, you're finding the data that you're going to cite. And if you cite that information, then you're not plagiarizing. You're only plagiarizing if you don't reference where you got the information. So you could do simply a vomit draft, which is simply put everything down that you know, and then look at it. And then given the structural guidelines I gave you, I think last time or the time before, you can certainly take a look at that and say, okay, are there some main points here? Does this information sort of organize itself in a pattern that now that I have it down on a page, I can see? So you can do that. You can also start at the beginning, which a lot of people like to do too. Start with an introduction. You find something that's interesting, start with that. If you want to start with the thesis or the preview, again, from a previous discussion, you know that you can really start anywhere in the speech. It doesn't matter. Just get some words written down, and then from there you can figure out what you have and what you need to fill in. So really, how do you start putting it together? You simply start. That's the easiest answer for you. There we go. On to the next slide. So a couple things I've got now after this slide, 2 speeches for you. One is an informative speech by a former competitor, James Baird, who took a gold medal at the 2022 state tournament, and Eric Crandall, who took a silver medal in persuasive speaking, also in the 2022 CCCFA state tournament. So what I'd like you to do is, as you watch these, you'll probably have to watch them twice. I would say do one at a time. What I want you to take note of, and this will then become, of course, a prompt and an assignment in Canvas, for those of you that are in my class. For the rest of you, you can do this or not. Would be, first off, try to identify how many websites are in each speech. And you can do these with hash marks. Just simply put lines every time you hear a website. Now, the website specifically means that I have heard, or you have heard, the .com, .edu, .mil, .gov, .org. When you hear those, you've heard a website. If you hear a statistic, that's not a website. That's data from somewhere. If you hear a study, if someone says, I found a study, that's not a website. If you say a website, a study found on stanford.edu, that's your website. So what I'd like you to do is every time you hear a source citation, jot the number of websites down. You're going to be surprised. The second thing I'd like you to do is try to identify the thesis and the preview of each speech. So in competition speeches, both of these are competition length, meaning they're 8 to 10 minutes. The thesis statement is going to be delayed just a bit because the significance portion of these speeches is going to be larger. So in a regular classroom speech, I think most instructors say a thesis should come up after a 30-second introduction, roughly, and you'd have that, and you'd have the preview following that right after. In a competition speech, there's a much larger sales pitch at the beginning, and literally a judge could at that point decide where they're going to rank somebody if they wish. Most judges are patient and listen to a whole speech, but they could, by the end of that sales pitch, decide how important this is. So in both of these speeches, you're going to hear a very long, after the attention getter, a very long significance block that's probably going to be about 30 seconds, 20 seconds. That delays then the thesis, and then that delays the preview. Note also that the thesis and the preview are probably not back to back. but you'll hear both of them. So what I'd like you to do, again, in a discussion that I'll post, is identify what the thesis is and the preview. And you can hear a first, next, and finally in the informative, and in the persuasion, it's going to be one sentence that says cause effect solution. Now I've given it to you, but I want you to write it down and tell me how that's different. Two other prompts I would like you to think about is, how are these speeches similar? I think that's always, just if we back up and look at this activity as, an educational tool in terms of what does it mean to be a speaker in public, and what does it mean to craft a speech, it's good to know how these things might be similar. And then finally, what makes them different? And that would be the last prompt that I'm going to give you. So with that, you can forward the slide into the next, the presenter, which is an informative speech followed by a persuasive speech. This is the last slide where you will hear me talk. And with that, enjoy the speeches.
Suppose you want to paint a room white. Sounds easy, right? Until you realize your local hardware store has literally dozens of white paints to choose from. Many have strange names that conjure up ever so slightly different hues, from cream, pearl, and eggshell to Navajo, ivory, ice cream, oatmeal, Napoleon, and newborn baby. With over 150 kinds of white paint to choose from, how do we make a choice? Well, the answer is deceptively simple. We should choose the paint that can help solve global warming. In January of this year, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration ranked 2019 and 2020 among the top three warmest years on record, with 2021 placing only slightly cooler sixth place. Unfortunately, the reality is that many cannot escape this extreme heat by simply staying indoors. The fact is, air conditioning is far from universal. According to EIA.gov, nearly one-third of US households struggle to maintain adequate cooling for their homes. To counteract this depressing reality, researchers at Purdue University have devised a simple solution to the world's most complex problem: a coat of paint so white it cools every surface it touches. So today, let's discuss a drastic game changer in the battle against global warming: ultra white paint. First, let's apply the primer and explore the science behind the purest shade of white on Earth. Second, the base coat, and examine the success behind ultra white paint and its various applications. And finally, the finishing coat. By understanding how paint could one day be crucial to combating global warming and climate change. Ultra-white paint is the extraordinary result of a 6-year project by researchers at Purdue University, and has two features that make it both the brightest and coolest paint on Earth. Fair warning, buckle your seatbelts for a complex lesson in chemistry and optics. The first feature contributing to ultra-white paint's extreme whiteness is its unique chemical composition. In contrast to regular commercial paints, which typically employ titanium dioxide, ultra-white paint uses a naturally occurring chemical compound called barium sulfate. This little-known substance is regularly used in the production of photo paper and cosmetic products, such as blush, face powder, and even certain nail polishes. However, according to Purdue.edu, the exceptionally high concentration of barium sulfate within ultra-white paint is responsible for its distinctive bright white color. The second feature that gives ultra-white paint its remarkable reflectiveness is the different sizes of each barium sulfate particle. Fortunately, the science surrounding this aspect is simple. The more light absorbed into a surface, the hotter it'll become, and the more heat it will subsequently emit. This scientific maxim explains why each particle is critical to the paint's overall reflectiveness, because they each individually reflect a different wavelength of the light spectrum. Larger particles reflect shorter wavelengths, while smaller particles reflect longer wavelengths. This allows the paint to intercept light with incredible efficiency. In fact, according to Engadget.com, it's this broad range of particles that allows the paint to scatter and reflect more light than any other substance on the planet. Now that you've passed the science portion of this speech, let's examine some successes and a few possible applications. Ultra white paint has the remarkable ability to influence the temperature of surfaces. keeping them cool even under intense sunlight. According to Smithsonian Magazine in April 2021, ultra-white paint is one of just a handful of substances capable of cooling a surface below the ambient temperatures of surrounding air. The researchers at Purdue conducted a series of controlled temperature stress tests to demonstrate the paint's incredible cooling abilities. The experiments found that it could keep surfaces up to 8 degrees Fahrenheit cooler when under direct sunlight. And tonight, the paint demonstrated the incredible ability to cool surfaces by up to 19 degrees Fahrenheit. According to CNN.com in April 2021, these results are a marked improvement from current heat rejecting paints. When struck by the sun's rays, surfaces covered in today's available white paints get warmer, not cooler. At best, these heat combating paints reflect 80 to 90% of sunlight. In contrast, ultra white paint reflects 98.1% of all the light it encounters. This ability means that ultra-white paint has many industrial applications. HouseBeautiful.com in May 2021 estimates that the applications of ultra-white paint are potentially endless, but might include building roofs, food storage units, warehouses, data centers, outdoor equipment, and even automobiles. Now, at this point, you might be thinking, are we going to paint everything white? While ultra-white paint is an effective heat combating tool, it would primarily be reserved for buildings and streets in areas of the world prone to extreme heat. So, no, we won't be painting the Sahara Desert anytime soon. Although the researchers at Purdue have completed the paint's development, they are currently doing additional testing to understand its long-term durability, with the goal of making it more available to the average consumer. An exact price for the paint has yet to be determined, but the university expects it will be similar to those on the market now, roughly between $30 and $40 a gallon. Now that you understand the science behind ultra-white paint and how it impacts surfaces, let's see how it could combat climate change by reducing energy consumption. Unlike bulky and expensive air conditioning units, ultra-white paint is simple and uncomplicated, yet still manages to solve many of today's important cooling issues without the heavy consumption of electricity or the release of toxic greenhouse gases. According to CNN.com in April 2021, if used on the industrial scale, ultra-white paint could potentially impact the climate by reducing energy consumption. By keeping surfaces cool and reducing our reliance on electrically powered air conditioners, ultra-white paint will significantly decrease the burning of toxic fossil fuels. What's more, modern air conditioners typically use convection, which works by removing heat from indoor spaces and pushing it outdoors. This heat transfer method contributes to the urban heat effect, a phenomenon that occurs when cities become hotter than the surrounding area, thus requiring the use of even more air conditioning. On the other hand, ultra-white paint uses radiation to transfer heat, harmlessly reflecting the sun's electromagnetic radiation back through the atmosphere and into deep space. In 2019, the U.S. Energy Information Administration estimated that the electric power industry released 1.72 billion metric tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, while producing just 13 trillion kilowatt hours. As a result, in the United States, nearly a pound of carbon dioxide is produced to generate just a single kilowatt hour. However, if ultra-white paint was applied to roofs and exterior walls, this ratio could be cut significantly. According to Smithsonian Magazine in April 2021, ultra-white paint provides an average cooling power of 113 watts per square meter. That means that if the paint was applied to the roof of a 1,000 square foot home, the cooling potential would equal about 10 kilowatts, which is comparatively more powerful than most residential air conditioners. However, this incredible cooling ability not only has the potential to reduce the release of toxic chemicals, but cool areas of our world where air conditioning is unavailable. According to NIH.gov, the World Health Organization conducted several studies in 2018 which showed a positive association between high indoor temperatures and adverse health effects. An example that hits close to home is the record-breaking heat wave that struck the northwestern United States last year. With a death toll well over 200, the heat wave particularly impacted Portland's Multnomah County, where many victims died alone, trapped within homes that lacked air conditioning or fans. According to EPA.gov, nearly 1,300 deaths per year in the United States are caused by extreme heat. These numbers are depressing. But for $30, we can save lives like those in the Multnomah County and at the same time affect meaningful and global climate change. So today we've explored the science, then the success, and finally the impact of ultra white paint in the battle with climate change. And while at first glance it might seem simple and unassuming, ultra white paint is quite literally the coolest substance ever created. And on a planet where things only seem to be getting hotter, it might just be the crucial breakthrough humanity needs to help us reduce greenhouse emissions, cool the planet, and most importantly, cool ourselves.
At the start of 2021, America prepared to sail for Super Bowl 55, gathering snacks and placing bets on whether the Tampa Bay Buccaneers or the Kansas City Chiefs would leave Florida victoriously with the Vince Lombardi Trophy in this much anticipated game. What America didn't bet on was the cyber attack occurring only 15 miles away and a couple of days before the big event. Only one of these events took the spotlight, and you can likely presume which one made national television first. On February 5th of 2021, a cyber attack in Oldsmar, Florida's computer system left a city of 15,000 individuals and their families at the hands of an unknown hacker. According to industrialdefender.com, the amount of sodium hydroxide, a main ingredient in drain cleaner, was increased to 100 times greater than the normal allowed level in less than 5 minutes. NBC News in June of 2021 stated of all the critical infrastructure in the United States, water is the most vulnerable to hackers who attempt to cause real-world harm to large populations. It is also the hardest in which to guarantee that everyone follows basic cybersecurity steps. CISA.gov stated on March 3rd, 2022, that cyber attacks on the Ukrainian government and critical infrastructure may have consequences for our own nation's critical infrastructure. Protecting our water supply needs to be prioritized to protect the many industries that are reliant upon the resource, and more importantly, the safety of our families. So today, let's look at the cause, effect, and solution to what the American Waterworks Association has described as the #1 threat facing the United States water sector: cyber attacks. On January 15th of 2021, a hacker successfully bypassed the security systems of a Bay Area community water supply. According to the San Francisco Chronicle, access was gained simply by using a former employee's username and password. The intruder then intentionally deleted the programs that were used to treat the drinking water, knowing that harm could be done if left unchecked. It wasn't until the next day when a vigilant employee realized that there was an intrusion and reinstalled the programs. It's time for America to wake up and anticipate events like these to happen more frequently. Security breaches like these happen because of 3 situations. First, the sheer amount of water facilities. Second, the lack of accountability and protocols. And third, a lack of oversight. The security breaches at Oldsmar and San Francisco were not isolated incidents. Similar situations have occurred in various other cities across the country. There are 153,000 water facilities in comparison to the 3,300 electric utility companies in the United States. Water providers that service 80% of the United States population were required to perform a security risk survey in 2018. Out of 542 organizations, only 10 of them complied. Smaller towns are not immune from the threat. There are still nearly 9,000 small suppliers that have not completed their EPA advised surveys. 40,000 of the small suppliers are exempt from these self-checks. Oddly, the water suppliers that completed their assessment were not required to share a copy of their data with the EPA. Therefore, the EPA cannot make assessments, penalize, or require compliance. NBCnews.com states that the usernames and passwords for at least 11 Oldsmar employees have been traded on the dark web. There seems to be no urgency in protecting our people, and that's a problem. With a lack of oversight, each facility is left to decide the extent of protection against cyber attackers. Now that you have seen numerous industry shortfalls in how easy it is to taint a water supply, we'll examine its impact to the world around us. Let's look at the prevalence of cyber attacks in other industries for last year alone. Molson Coors was crippled by a breach in March. The SolarWinds hack that compromised government systems occurred in April. In June, operations at the largest meat supplier in the nation were held at ransom for $11 million. According to governing.com, those who aspire to become hackers don't need to understand programming. Software that enables attacks can be purchased through darknet marketplaces for as little as $50. And that even includes tech support. Hackers not only have the means and the opportunity to sabotage systems, but they can also hold facilities at ransom, harm agriculture, and cripple healthcare. Their intent is to find vulnerabilities and create terror. The question is not if, but when will an adversary take advantage of the weak cybersecurity protecting our water infrastructure? According to the California Department of Food and Agriculture, California's farms and ranches produced approximately $50 billion of revenue during the year 2019, with approximately 2.5 million acres of farmland. The water supply to support the growth of fruits, vegetables, and dairy is susceptible to being tampered with by an outside entity, placing the multi-billion-dollar agriculture industry at risk if there is a denial of service. An additional sector that would be affected by the loss of water would be our healthcare system. In fact, the Wall Street Journal states that the Great Plains Health System in Nebraska blocks approximately 10,000 unauthorized attempts to access its servers daily. If a hospital had accessibility issues to the water supply, the staff's capacity to provide quality healthcare would be significantly strained, becoming a detriment to efficiently care for those in need. We have seen the effects of water loss during Texas's winter storm in February 2021. According to the Washington Post, one hospital was reduced to relying on buckets of rainwater, using trash bags to remove feces, and resorting to hand sanitizer instead of soap and water. Procedures such as surgeries, wound care, and the use of ventilators are just a few items on the list that would be negatively impacted or halted. Now that we have talked about our water being subject to dangerous amounts of chemicals and the absence of supply, where do you go from here? Clearly, the current system in place is inefficient and ineffective. We first need to look at other critical sectors and their enforcement policies before turning to workable solutions. For example, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission has the power to enforce civil penalties, regulatory requirements, and can conduct meaningful audits. According to CNBC in May of 2020, PG&E was penalized $1.9 billion for neglecting their utilities. According to Bloomberg.com, oil pipeline operators who fail to report cybersecurity attacks to the Department of Homeland Security could face fines of up to $7,000. And water suppliers don't even receive a slap on the wrist. The Wall Street Journal of February 2021 stated that more than 50,000 community water systems that supply most Americans with the drinking water don't have to meet any national or state standard for cybersecurity. Fortunately, industry experts say that many of these improvements can be made with minimal spending. Improvements such as enforcing passive protection, using pre-existing firewalls and encryption, and cyber training can put us on the right track. Now, one way to deal with this issue is to hold the federal government accountable. According to CNN in January 2022, the Biden administration has created a 100-day plan that will address the inadequate cyber resilience across the water sector. This will target the larger sectors and utilize tools to make utilities more secure. Unfortunately, this program is voluntary, and so is your safety. The Washington Post in January 2022 stated that the EPA cannot effectively assess and support the water sector due to a lack of will to confront the national security crisis. Even the American Water Works Association is asking for federal oversight. Reallocation of current funding with a small sum of $5 million would finance up to 50 cybersecurity agents, providing technical assistance primarily to rural areas and aiding agriculture across the country. Now, how can you make a difference? Contact your local and state representatives to raise awareness before someone with malicious intent compromises your drinking water. The United States government has taken steps to protect other utilities. Attention should now be focused on working closer with the water industry. So today, we briefly talked about the causes, effects, and solutions concerning the water sector and the need to prioritize our defense to appropriately respond to the increased threat of cyber attacks. Risking American safety in industry is unacceptable when we have the knowledge to mitigate issues in the present. The United States needs to open the spigot allowing the American tax dollar to flow towards upgrading critical water infrastructure. And the standard should be set by the federal government to protect its people. In a land that prides themselves on equality, whether you're from a large city or a small town, we deserve to be equally protected from threats foreign and domestic. You may ask yourselves whether the cup is half full or if the cup is half empty. But I ask you, what good is that water if you can't even drink it?